Hello, and welcome to day number 10 of 21 days of personal development. This time we're going to be talking about courage, and it's part of the resources that we can use for our personal development. Now, courage, there are many ways that courage can be described, and there's also many amazing quotes that over the years people have expressed what courage is. I'm going to use a definition that I find very useful because it lists 5 elements of what courage entails. And you might agree, you might disagree, but take what you can from this session and see if you can learn something. So the definition that I'm going to be using is based around some of the work of Dr. Brené Brown, and this particular definition is not specifically or definitely from Brené Brown directly. She does definitely agree with a lot of what this definition is, but the definition itself comes from womanworking.com. So I'm not sure if they use a little bit of their own ideas into this, but either way, it's useful. So, number 1, the first element, courage is asking for what you need. Now, part of asking for what you need could be expressing your feelings. Do you say if your feelings are hurt? Do you express the feelings that you have when it's needed or necessary for you to do so? Do you ask for what you need when it's uncomfortable for you to do that, but it is a real need? The second element of courage is speaking your truth. Now, speaking our truth is one of the most difficult aspects, in my opinion, of courage, because often the truth that we don't want to speak is something that we're a tiny bit shy about or a tiny bit ashamed about. Now, this could be illness that you have, or it could be a loss that you've experienced in your life. This could be that you are struggling to find work. It could be that you are a little bit depressed. It could be that you really need to not drink alcohol because you have a bit of alcohol dependence or alcoholism. It could be a number of different things that are actually at times very difficult to communicate. And what I found in my own life, I have 2 incurable and also invisible diseases. They are both autoimmune diseases. The one is type 1 diabetes and the other is celiac disease. And for a large amount of my life, I found it very difficult to openly tell people that there are certain things I simply cannot eat. I have often had my ostrich head in the sand sort of approach to trying to ignore it and try and get away with not telling people and just avoiding eating or just eating the few things that I can eat. And what actually I found to be a significant way to be able to speak your truth is simply making the decision, the conscious decision, that you are going to do that. It sounds very simple, but it does make a little bit of a difference. And as with most things in life, as you practice speaking your truth, whatever that might be, whether it's something like an incurable disease or something that's completely different um, that you don't want, or that you want the world to know, or a way that some aspect of yourself. I mean, I don't know what your truth is, so I have no idea how to even begin to use examples for you, but you know what your truth is. So make a decision to start practicing in small ways, speaking it. And as you practice, it'll get easier. Element number three, courage is owning your story. And another way that we could say this is courage is accepting your story. And that is fairly straightforward, not to do, but at least to understand. And there are many resources online about how we can accept things, how we can accept grief and loss, how we can deal with trying to understand and be gentle on ourselves to accept things that have happened. So I encourage you, if that is one of the ones that you're struggling with, do a little bit of research. Not everyone's method of acceptance is going to be exactly the same. For some people, it is quite a process to accept something. So accepting your own story, especially if there are aspects of your story that you struggle with, accepting it and accepting yourself and owning your story might take a bit of a journey, but I encourage you to start walking that road. Element number four is setting boundaries. And I'll speak a bit about that later. And number five is reaching out for support, which again is one that's easy to understand and sometimes a little bit difficult to do. Asking for support is surprisingly difficult for most of us. Now, if we go back to setting boundaries, there are certain things that can help us with setting boundaries. And I'd like to refer to the work of Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. Now, when we speak about accepting, not accepting, when we speak about setting boundaries, there are certain aspects of setting boundaries that's important to keep in mind. The first one is that boundaries are about setting boundaries on yourself, not on trying to control others. Second is that when we set boundaries, it's an act of love. It's not an act of manipulation or control or a desire to get things to go our way. The boundaries, when we speak about boundaries that we're talking about, are things that are within our control. So when we set a boundary, we are making use of these things that are within our control. And these things include your love, your feelings, your choices, your limits, your attitudes and beliefs, your behaviors, your thoughts, your values, your talents and resources, and your desires. These are within our control. Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend have done a fair amount of writing and speaking about personal boundaries, these personal boundaries that we all have control over. So when we set a boundary, we are exercising one of those 10 personal boundaries, and we do it in love when we tell another person that we want to protect ourselves in a certain way. And then when we decide that we actually, if there's something that we need to protect ourselves from, we put in place a consequence. Now, the reason why I say that we're putting the boundary on ourselves is because if the other person does not respect the boundary that we've put in place, or they don't do what we're hoping that they're going to do, or they choose not to, we can't make them, because they are also in control of their own thoughts, behaviors, choices, feelings, etc. So we can't control those. It's within their control. But what we can control is the consequence. And the consequence is something that we put in place. So if a parent says to a child, if you scream again, we're going to leave the restaurant. That is a boundary that they've put in place. They say, don't scream. And the consequence is, if you scream, we're going to leave the restaurant. But the parent then has to also actually use their own self-discipline to then implement the boundary that they have set. So then if the child does scream again, they actually have to then take their family and leave the restaurant, because a boundary without consequences is not a boundary. So those are just very, very briefly some thoughts about boundaries. Now, what do you think about these 5 elements of courage? Do you agree with them? Do they help you to understand exercising courage? They help me. They help me to understand what it would actually mean to tap into my courage, and the action steps that I would need to take to have courage, asking for what I need, speaking my truth, owning my story, setting boundaries, and reaching out for support. I hope that's been useful, and thanks for listening. Bye.